So today we're going to be going over Access Basics, getting a feel for the database, what tables look like, how to enter and alter records in a table, and so on and so forth. You should have gotten the instructions and a zip folder from your instructor's assignment section. And I've already downloaded and extracted these to a folder that I called Access Basics. And this is what is contained within it. These are the instructions right here. So we see a number of tables with these field names. And as we'll see, the field names are just columns within the Access database called Education right here. We're going to enable the content. And as you can see, we have some text data going on in these ones right here for school types. Some percentages and some more text types going on over here. So we'll get into what queries, forms, and reports are later on in this course. But for now, we're just going to focus on a high-level view of what's going on in Access. So this area right up top here is called the ribbon. It's much like how it is in Excel. There's all kinds of different tools for when you want to create a table, for example. You'll go under this Create tab. If you're going to import an XML or CSV file, for example, you would go under External Data. And then for database tools, for example, at the end, you're going to have to run compact and repair database. And that's found under the Database Tools tab right there. So let's get started with this. So the next step that we're going to do if we check our instructions is we need to add some additional records to the school types table. So we're going to navigate in our Access database to the tables, which is in this navigation pane over here, to school types, which I've already opened before when I was just demonstrating some of the tables that we had. And we're going to add a couple more records: preschool, alternative school, and technical center. So we need to enter records in two fields. So we're going to add those three. We're going to type capital PRE for preschool under the school type abbreviation. If you hover over with your cursor in between the two columns, you'll be able to widen these field names a bit, and it might make it easier for you to see exactly which fields you're going to be entering the data into. And this is going to be called preschool. The next one is alternative school, so ALS. And alternative school. And the final one is TEC, Technical Center. So as you can see, all I had to do to add these fields is go in where this asterisk is beside the field name, the first field, and just click on that cell and start typing. For these tables, you're going to have to type in something for each of these fields. So the next thing is we're going to modify records in the schools table. So I'm going to navigate over to the schools table. But first, I'm going to right-click over school types and click Save. And then I'm going to right-click again and close out of the school types table. And the next thing we're going to go to is the schools table. So what we need to do is change the grades served to 01-05 for Wiley Ford Primary School. So we could do this a number of ways. We could manually search through all of the school names until we find it, or we could click on this down arrow right here under the school name, and we're going to uncheck where it says select all, and we're going to go all the way down until we hit Wiley. It's Wiley Ford Primary School. Yeah. So we're going to go all the way down and check that box right there and click OK. And we're going to change this to 01-05. And we're going to right click and save so we don't lose any of our work. Next, we're going to change Pickens Elementary High School from an elementary middle high school to an elementary school. So we're going to go back to that filter, and we're just going to uncheck that field for Wiley and go peek at our instructions again. It's going to be Pickens Elementary School. Pickens Elementary High School. And the school type, instead of being an elementary middle high school to an elementary school. So an ELS. And we're going to save that again. The next one is we're going to try and change Bellington Elementary's school type abbreviation to AHS. So we're going to, again, search for that particular elementary school, and we're going to try and change it to AHS. And then when we do that, we get this error. If you see this come up, it means that what you entered does not match the abbreviations that are found in another table or the data that is being pulled from another table. It violates the referential integrity. So we're going to click OK. And we're going to go back and call that an ELS. So we're going to save. And we don't need these filters on. So we're just going to go back. Again, all I did was I clicked on this down arrow, and I clicked on this button that's now grayed out, and it says Clear Filter from School Name. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to close it since we're done with that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to delete records from the school types table. We're going to delete the Technical Center record that we entered in there before. So we're going to go over to the school types table. We're going to hover over until our cursor turns into a right-facing black arrow. where it says Technical Center or TEC, and we're going to go right-click, delete record. It asks us to confirm whether we want to delete the record. It's not an error, it's just asking us to confirm, so we're going to click yes. Now, in the next step, where we try to delete the elementary school record, it's going to give us an error because it's used in a bunch of other different cases in other tables. So when we try and delete this record, you get that referential integrity error. So that means it's being used a bunch of other times outside the scope of just this table. And that deleting it would compromise the other tables that are using it. So we're all done with this schools type table. We're going to save it and we're going to close. The next step right here, number 6, is we're going to explore the design view and look at the properties for each field. So we'll start off with analysis questions. We're going to open that up, and you can either go to the Home tab and change the view here by clicking on this view with the down arrow, and that gives you the drop down, and that'll take you to the design view. Or if you right click over this tab right here, you can click the design view as well. So we see a couple of different types of data here. We have short text and long text. So if we go back to the analysis questions in our datasheet view, which is where we'll enter all of the information like we did for the tables that we worked with before for school types, you'll see that there's a significant amount of space, for example, in this response. The short text data type is for, as the name suggests, shorter pieces of text information. So something that's like the length of a person's address. The long text is more for like a paragraph or more. So if we go back to the design view, we can also see some of the field properties right here. So we can see that, for example, it's required to have an entry there, and there are no duplicates. And here's where you can change the text alignment as well. And if you click on each of these cells right here, you'll get a drop-down option over here. You can change, for example, the alignment and other properties. You can also change the format, and we'll see with some of the number ones how that'll make a difference. So I'm going to close out of the analysis questions. And the next one we're going to move to is annual statistics, and we're just going to keep moving right down the line. So as you can see in this datasheet view right here, you have what looks to be a number type, some text, more text, either text or a number type right there, number that's a percent specifically. And then you have all kinds of other percentages going on over here in annual statistics. So if we go to the design view by right-clicking over that tab right there, you'll see that you have an auto number. So what this does is it automatically enumerates or numbers the entries in this table sequentially. So for example, when we go back to the datasheet view, it starts off at 1, then 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, all the way down to 4,125. And this is where you can see how many records you have in a given table. And then you can just count the number of fields or columns. Those terms will be used interchangeably, but the proper term is field for the columns in Access. Okay? Going back to the design view, if we click on these numbers right here, we see that the field size is double. There's a couple of other options right here. For example, integer, which is negative and positive numbers, as well as just regular whole numbers, decimal, so on and so forth. Percent is the formatting, so that's where you'll add a percent sign. And the decimal places is an example of how we would also format. I didn't change anything on there, so I'm not going to save it. Okay, I guess I'll just save it anyway. If, for example, I only wanted one decimal place right here in attendance rate, I would modify it in the design view under where it says format percent, and then there's decimal places right below there. So I'm done with this. I'm going to close. We're going to take a look in counties. This is a long integer type for the population. So there's not going to be any decimal points in there. It's just going to be a whole number, and it's going to be a relatively big number in some of these cases. So going back to the design view, we see that the number of decimal places is 0. If we look at the dropouts in the design view, you'll see that you just have some standard short text. We'll talk about what these key symbols mean in the next lecture when we discuss fields and keys. And there's nothing too special for right here. For the grade served, if you notice down here under where it says required, and you look on the school name, you'll see that they're different in that respect. So when you make something a key or a primary key, which we'll again discuss in the subsequent lecture, there has to be data in that field. Otherwise, it can't be used as a primary key. So that's it for that part. So the next area that we're going to explore is going to be the queries, which we'll be discussing more extensively throughout the rest of this course. So if we close out of the school type, we're going to click close, and we just double click on this attendance query. If we right click, we can also see the design view for these queries. You'll see these are the table names that are going right here. And you'll see these lines connecting them. Those are called relationships. And we'll discuss those more in subsequent lectures. So if you see down here, you have the table that these individual fields or columns from these tables are being pulled from, how they're sorted, if at all. For example, the county, school name, and school year are being sorted in ascending order. And you also see that you can start setting things called criteria. And we'll be getting to that soon as well. The criteria allow us to filter our results that are displayed in the query. So after you have the design view, you can go to the design tab and click run, and that'll give you the query. If you haven't already opened the query up, you run it by double clicking on an unopened query. So if we explore the design view, we see that not every table needs to be used when we're making these queries. And we see that there's all kinds of things that can be added. For example, this total row did not exist in the design view of the attendance query. So we'll get to how to add that in a minute in subsequent lectures, but there's the highlighted button right there. You can also change the formatting of these fields as well. So for example, the population has some features that we could add to the property sheet. We can change the number of decimal places or other formatting for how it's displayed in the query. If it was a percentage, if it was in a calculation, we would change that here in the property sheet, which is all done under the Design tab. And going all the way over to the right, under this Show Hide section, you have the Property Sheet button. So you see the number of records is different down here than it would be for these tables individually. And that's because we've added things like criteria that are filtering out data that doesn't match what we want to see in our end results. Our next stop is in the form section. So if we double click on this school data form, we see information from school statistics. And we see the school name up top here. And as you can see from the instructions down here, that they provide a nice, easy way for people to edit data rather than going and hunting through the table like we did before when we were deleting records or when we were making alterations to the records before. So the subform within this school data form is this school statistics data. Our last stop here is the reports section. And as you can see from the instructions, they provide a structured way to view the contents of tables or results of queries. So we're going to just take a look at it and make sure that it's in layout view, which it is. You also have the print preview, which we can close over here. The design view, where you can add more granular features, and the report view. We're going to go back to the layout view, and that's where we're going to stop right there. And the last step that we're going to do is go back to that database tools, and we're going to click compact and repair. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of all of these queries. And I'm going to click compact and repair database. Now that that's done, I'm going to X out.